The sauce hissed and bubbled over, sending up a plume of smoke as Chef Mateo yanked the pot off the burner. He coughed, swore under his breath, and stared down at the charred remains of what should have been a red pepper bisque. "Damn it. Not again," he muttered, wiping his brow with the sleeve of his oil-stained apron. The kitchen, dimly lit and peeling at the corners, felt like it was caving in. Behind him, the last working stove let out a final sputter and died. "No, come on," he said, slamming the igniter. "Nothing, just a faint click." "You can't quit on me, too," a voice shouted from the front. "Order for table 4 ready yet?" Mateo glanced toward the pass-through window, then back at the dead burner. His lips tightened. He moved fast, salvaging what he could, plating something close to edible. "You're gonna get a warm meal," he whispered, half to the food, half to himself. Later, the dinner rush had thinned. A leak in the ceiling tapped rhythmically into a pot below. Mateo limped to the back counter, rubbing his wrist, a scarred reminder from years in better kitchens. He reached under the flour bin and pulled out a leather-bound recipe book. Frayed, stained, loved. Tucked inside was a yellow envelope. He hesitated, then slid it out. An eviction notice. Final. Dated next week. Mateo stared at it in silence, breath shallow. The sauce still clung to his sleeve, burnt and bitter. His fingers trembled slightly, but he didn't tear the letter. He folded it back in, set the book down, and turned off the kitchen light. Outside, unseen through the window, a boy in a torn hoodie watched the last glow fade behind the glass. The back alley behind Mateo's restaurant smelled of garlic, grease, and yesterday's regrets. Steam curled from a vent above the door as the chef stepped out with a sigh, cradling a paper bag like it held something sacred. He paused, then noticed movement near the dumpsters. A boy, no older than 10, crouched low behind a stack of crates. Torn hoodie, thin arms, shoes wrapped in duct tape. Mateo's voice was calm. "You lost, kid?" The boy froze. "I'm not going to call anyone," Mateo added, setting the bag down on a crate. "But if you're hungry, this is still warm." The boy didn't move. His eyes flicked from Mateo's face to the bag, suspicious. "I made too much," Mateo lied. "Happens when you cook for ghosts." The boy stepped forward slowly, eyes darting. "What's your name?" Mateo asked. Silence. "All right," Mateo said softly. "You don't owe me a word. Just take the food." The boy grabbed the bag, then retreated a few steps, still watching Mateo like a stray cat waiting for a trick. "I'll leave the light on back here," Mateo added, pointing to the side door. "If you come back, no questions." The boy's voice was barely a whisper. "Thanks." Mateo nodded, then turned, the alley light flickering above his head as he went inside. Back inside, the clatter of plates and hum of the fridge returned. Mateo leaned against the sink, staring at his hands. "Kid's got those same eyes," he murmured. Outside, the boy sat cross-legged behind the dumpster, pulling the sandwich from the bag like it was treasure. He bit in with care, like someone used to losing things too soon. His eyes flicked back toward the lit window. He would come back, and Mateo knew it. The boy returned the next night. Mateo found him sitting at the alley crate again, feet swinging, the same paper bag in his lap, refilled with care. "You like tomato soup?" Mateo asked, holding the door open. The boy hesitated, then nodded. "Come on in. I won't bite." Inside, the kitchen smelled like rosemary and burnt hope. The boy stepped cautiously over the cracked tiles, eyes scanning the hanging pans and battered counters like they were part of some forgotten kingdom. "You ever been in a kitchen?" The boy shrugged. "Used to, with my dad." "Before?" "Before what?" The boy's shoulders lifted, then dropped. Mateo didn't press. Instead, he handed the boy a spoon and pointed at the pot. "Stir it, slow and even." They stood in silence, steam curling between them. "You know how to cook?" Mateo asked. "Some things," the boy replied. "My dad, he used to make this chicken dish. Had orange peels and this green stuff. Cilantro, maybe. He always called it the Sunday surprise. Said it was a secret." Mateo smiled. Every chef's got one of those. The boy rummaged through his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was worn, creased to the edge of tearing. He opened it carefully and held it out. A child's drawing. A messy sketch of a plated dish, but with one detail circled. A signature. Elegant, curved, Mateo's fingers froze. He knew that signature. He hadn't seen it in 20 years. He whispered, "Where did you get this?" The boy looked up, voice small. "It was in my backpack when they found me." "I don't remember much." Mateo stared at the page, heart pounding. That signature belonged to a man no one had seen since he vanished. And the recipe was his. Rain tapped gently on the rusted kitchen window the next morning. Mateo stood over the stove, staring into the pan as if it held more than eggs and oil. The boy sat nearby on an upturned milk crate, scribbling in silence. "You ever write letters you never send?" Mateo asked suddenly. The boy looked up. "To who?" "To someone you miss." A long pause. "I wrote hundreds," Mateo said, voice low. "All to my daughter. Every birthday. Every Christmas. Even when I didn't know where she was." He walked over to a drawer. From it he pulled a shoebox. Worn, taped, stuffed with yellowing envelopes. "I used to think if I kept writing, maybe one day, she'd feel it. Like a signal." The boy tilted his head. "What happened?" Mateo exhaled. "Her mom left when she was 5. Said I was married to my kitchen more than to her. Took my daughter with her." He sat down across from the boy, resting the box between them. "I stayed behind. Thought I could build something she'd be proud of. But the letters never brought her back." The boy reached forward, gently tracing the corner of an envelope. "You're still writing them," he said softly. "Yeah." Mateo chuckled bitterly. "I guess I never knew how to stop." A silence passed, filled only by the hum of the flickering light. Then the boy whispered, "I think you'd be a good dad." Mateo's hand paused mid-stir. He looked up, but the boy had already turned back to his drawing. Outside, the rain began to fall harder. Inside, the chef wiped his hands, but his eyes remained wet. A storm was coming, but not from the sky. The lunch crowd had thinned to a polite murmur when she walked in. Heels that clicked like coins, a handbag that smelled of marble and tax forms. She slipped into a corner booth and lifted the menu like a judge reading a verdict. Mateo noticed her immediately. She watched the kitchen through the pass like a patron inspects livestock. A server approached. "Ma'am, our special today is—" "I'll have the chef's best," she said, voice smooth as chilled butter. "And make sure it's Instagram ready. I have followers." Mateo tightened his jaw. He plated slowly, breathing like a man measuring a confession. When he carried the dish out, she tipped the plate, speaking loudly enough for the room to lean in. "This is rustic," she said, lips curling. "Is this supposed to be artisan or just old?" "My followers expect excellence," a table nearby chuckled. "Someone filmed." Mateo felt it like a small electric shock. From the alley, the boy watched through the window, hands pressed to the glass. Mateo stepped forward before his pride could be measured into silence. "If you want different, ma'am, tell me what you'd like." "I'll make it," she smiled like a blade. "No, darling. I prefer perfection served in places that cost more than this kitchen. Not everyone can appreciate simplicity." A fork clinked too loudly. The room drifted between pity and amusement. The boy's face reddened. He stood up, voice raw. "She's rude and fake. You make the best food here. Don't listen to her." His words cut the space open. Someone in the corner laughed and posted the clip to their phone. The server's hands shook. Mateo felt shame and something fiercer. The urge to protect. Outside, unnoticed at first, a phone lit up and a tiny red notification pulsed. Uploaded. The video began to spread. The next few days moved like soft notes in a slow song. The boy kept returning, always at dusk, always with dirt on his hands and hope in his eyes. Mateo, once guarded, began pulling out old pans he hadn't touched in years. The kitchen, once heavy with silence, now buzzed with quiet energy. One night Mateo handed the boy a knife. "Try chopping the parsley." "Fine." Not mush. The boy nodded, gripping the blade like it mattered. His hands moved clumsily at first, then smoother. Mateo watched, half smiling. Later the boy stood over a pan, mimicking Mateo's movements, adding broth, stirring slow. "This is how he did it," the boy whispered. "My dad." He reached into his coat, pulling out that same folded drawing. Mateo studied it again. The lines were messy, but the memory was clear. "What's this dish called?" he asked. "I don't know. I just remember the smell. Sweet oranges and garlic. And the green stuff." Mateo turned away, opening a forgotten cabinet. Inside he pulled down a box, labeled Recipes, 2002. He flipped through yellowed pages until he stopped. "Let's try something." They cooked together in silence, the boy watching every move. Orange zest curled into the pan. Garlic hissed. Cilantro danced last. When Mateo plated it, his hands trembled. He set it before the boy. The boy took one bite, closed his eyes. "This is it," he said. "Exactly it." Mateo stared, stunned. "That recipe, it was stolen. 20 years ago. From someone I used to know." The boy looked up, confused. Mateo didn't say more. He turned, hand resting on the counter, heart pounding with something he hadn't felt in years. Recognition and fear, because if this dish was real, the past was about to wake up. The rain came down like needles, sharp and unrelenting. Mateo stood under the broken awning of a tall brownstone across town, soaked through, fists clenched. He hadn't stood at this door in 2 decades. He rang the bell. A voice answered, polished and surprised. "Mateo, I thought you'd be dead? Forgotten?" Mateo snapped. "I was, until your stolen recipe showed up in a kid's backpack." Lucian Rourke, once his mentor, now a chef-turned-mogul, smoothed his silk collar and waved Mateo inside. "You're angry. Sit." Mateo didn't. "I trusted you," Mateo growled. "I shared everything with you in that kitchen. That dish, it was mine. You published it, branded it, built an empire on it." Lucian leaned against the marble island, unbothered. "I elevated it. You abandoned it when you walked out." "I walked out because you sold your soul." Lucian's expression sharpened. Mateo stepped closer. "I met a boy, homeless, said his dad vanished. Had a drawing of that dish, with your signature, and he knew how to cook it." Lucien flinched. Mateo's voice lowered. "What did you do, Lucian?" A long silence. Then, "There was a woman, a deal. She needed money. I adopted the boy." Quietly. Paperwork buried. "It was supposed to stay buried." Mateo stared. "You took a child like a recipe. Rebranded him. He was going to have everything." Mateo's hands shook. "And yet he's on the street, eating out of dumpsters." Lucian looked away. The storm outside rattled the windows. Inside, something colder had already broken. Mateo stepped back, disgusted. "That boy, he's not just your mistake. He's someone's son. Someone real." And in that moment the thought began to form, what if that someone was the missing billionaire chef? Mateo returned to the kitchen late. The boy sat at the table peeling carrots with a dull blade, his eyes heavy but hopeful. "You okay?" he asked. Mateo nodded, setting down his soaked coat. "Just had to talk to an old ghost." The boy tilted his head. "Was he scary?" Mateo forced a smile. "Worse. Polished." Silence. Then the boy reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a crumpled envelope. "I've been keeping this," he said quietly. "Didn't know if I should show you." Mateo took it gently. Opened it. Inside was a torn birth certificate. Water damaged, edges frayed. The name printed across the top hit him like a train. Aurelio James Venn. Mateo looked up, stunned. "Venn? That name?" The boy shrugged. "I don't know who he is. I don't remember much. Just flashes. A kitchen with gold handles. A man with flour on his glasses." Mateo sat down, the air thick around him. "Do you know who Venn is?" the boy asked. Mateo hesitated. "I think you might be the son of someone the world's been looking for. A man who vanished. A chef who was betrayed." The boy's brow furrowed. "Why would someone hide me?" Because you're worth more than they wanted to admit. He pulled out his phone. Scrolled. Stopped at a name. Who are you calling? The boy asked. A friend, Mateo said. Used to be a private investigator. He finds what others bury. The boy looked down at the name on the certificate. I don't feel like an Aurelio, he whispered. Mateo reached over, resting a hand on the boy's. You're whatever you choose to become. But inside, Mateo's heart whispered, what if this boy was born into gold and abandoned into hunger? The storm passed, but a quieter one remained inside the boy. He sat curled in a booth after closing time, shaking, not from cold, but from something deeper. Mateo kneeled beside him, gently placing a folded towel over the boy's shoulders. Breathe with me, he said softly. In, out. The boy's chest hitched. Sometimes I hear shouting, even when it's quiet. Mateo nodded slowly. Your hands. They remember before your head does. He walked to the counter, returned holding 2 chef's knives. You ever cut onions? The boy looked up, confused. Knife work is rhythm. Like music, it quiets everything else. They stood side by side at the prep table. Mateo placed a chopping board in front of him. Grip firm, fingers curled. Move with the blade, not against it. The boy's first few cuts were shaky, but Mateo didn't correct him. Only hummed softly, a tune from no song but full of patience. The boy found the rhythm. The panic began to slow. Good, Mateo whispered. Now let's try garlic. A quiet montage unfolded, hands slicing, steam rising, laughter warming the air. A simple meal, made not for taste, but for healing. When they finally sat, the boy said softly, I feel quiet now. Mateo nodded. That's how I survived too. Music wasn't always a song. Sometimes it was soup. A silence hung between them. Peaceful this time. Then the boy looked up, eyes wide. Can I stay? Mateo hesitated. You mean tonight? No, the boy said. Forever. Mateo blinked, the question slicing through him cleaner than any knife. He didn't answer. Not yet. But across the kitchen, the old radio crackled on its own, and a jazz tune from years ago filled the space. The kind of music that means something's beginning. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and hope that morning. Mateo stood over a pot of simmering compote while the boy laid out mismatched silverware, grinning at how crooked the napkins looked. We should make menus, the boy said. Mateo smiled. Only if you spell everything wrong. It's tradition. A knock interrupted them. Loud, hard. He opened the back door to 2 stern-faced women in gray windbreakers. Mr. Mateo Romano? One asked. Yes, we're from Child Protective Services. We've received reports of an unregistered minor living on these premises. Mateo's voice dropped. He's not living here. He's just... The boy appeared behind him, eyes wide, a dish towel still in hand. The taller woman softened. Sweetheart, it's okay. We just need to speak with you. Alone. The boy clutched Mateo's arm. Do you have legal guardianship? The second woman asked. No, but he's safe here. Sir, that's not how this works. The moment fractured. Mateo turned to the boy, kneeling. It's just a talk. I'll be right here. No, the boy whispered, eyes wet. Don't let them take me, please. One woman gently took his hand. He pulled back at first, then gave in. As they led him toward the car, the boy turned, shouting, You're the only real dad I've ever had. The kitchen went silent. The compote burned. Mateo didn't move. Only the old clock ticked, cruel and steady. Across the street, a woman filmed from her stoop. Another video. Another moment gone viral, but this one tasted like ashes. The table they'd set that morning remained untouched. The boy sat on a velvet couch, untouched tea steaming on the table beside him. Everything in the house felt like it had been dusted twice, as if wealth could erase loneliness. Across from him, a woman with sharp heels and sharper eyes stared down. Your last name is Venn. Do you understand what that means? He shook his head. You come from legacy, from brilliance, from chefs whose names are carved into marble downtown. The boy looked away. I don't even like marble. Meanwhile, Mateo stood outside the estate's iron gates, gripping a folder in one hand. Birth certificate copies, the PI's report, proof of how the boy had been discarded. Inside, the boy sat beside a lawyer. "We've drafted custody paperwork," the man said. "We'll enroll you in a private academy, arrange counseling, media training." "I just want to go back to the kitchen," the boy whispered. The lawyer frowned. "That's not appropriate. You belong in better hands now." The boy blinked, tears hot in his throat. "He's my better hands." Back at the gate, Mateo tried once more. A guard blocked him. "He's in there alone," Mateo said. "That's not family. That's display." He didn't fight. He turned and walked away. That night, the mansion sat lit like a museum, but the boy didn't sleep. He stared out the window, whispering recipes under his breath, all the ones Mateo taught him. And then, sometime after midnight, he packed the folded drawing, the recipe sketch, the chef's knife Mateo let him sharpen once, and climbed out the window. Barefoot, hoodie zipped, heart pounding. He ran. Mateo was closing up when he heard the bang. Not from outside, but within the walls. The lights flickered. Then a sharp crack snapped through the ceiling. Smoke slithered from the vents like a warning. He grabbed the fire extinguisher, ran to the back, and found sparks spitting from the old fuse box. Then a voice. Faint. Urgent. "Mateo!" He turned. The boy stood in the alley doorway, panting, eyes wide. "I came back? Wait, what's that smell?" Flames burst from the ceiling tiles above the prep table. Mateo shouted, "Get out now!" But the boy didn't move. He ran forward, grabbing the framed recipe off the wall, the one Mateo had hung above the sink, their Sunday surprise. "Leave it," Mateo cried. The heat grew sharp. The smoke thickened. But the boy clutched the frame to his chest like it was a lifeline. Mateo pulled him close, wrapped his coat around him, and together they stumbled out the back door into the cold night air. Flames clawed at the windows behind them. Sirens wailed in the distance. The boy coughed hard, collapsing onto the pavement. Mateo dropped beside him. "I told you to run," he said, shaking. "I couldn't," the boy gasped. "That recipe. It's us." A firefighter rushed over, checking them both. Another walked from the alley holding a soot-covered bag. Inside were Mateo's old photographs, the boy's drawing, and the handwritten recipe, singed but intact. The boy gripped it like a miracle. Mateo touched his shoulder. "You okay?" "I think I'm finally home," the boy whispered. Behind them the fire roared, but between them something had survived. Something worth rebuilding. Ashes still lingered in the air days later. Mateo stood in the shell of his kitchen. The walls blackened, counters warped, but his hands were steady. The boy sat nearby, sketching a new version of the menu on scrap cardboard. "We'll call it the burnt comeback," he joked. Mateo smiled faintly. "Not bad. Might scare customers away, though." A car door slammed outside. Footsteps approached. He turned toward the door and froze. A woman stood there holding her purse like it was armor. Dark curls, hazel eyes. She hadn't aged much, but her expression had. It was his daughter. She stepped into the ruins with hesitation. "I saw the video," she said. "And then, I saw your name in the paper. Fire. Homeless boy. Chef Mateo Romano." He didn't speak. Just looked at her like he'd looked at the letters he never sent. Full of everything unsaid. She reached into her coat, pulling out a thick envelope. "I don't have much, but I want to help you rebuild. And I want to know the boy, if you'll let me." The boy looked up, curious, quiet. Mateo's voice cracked. "You really came." "I never stopped reading those letters," she said. "I just didn't know how to answer." Mateo turned to the boy. "This is my daughter, your maybe sister in cinnamon disasters." The boy stood slowly, stepping forward. She knelt to his level. "You helped my dad remember how to be one." He smiled. "He helped me believe I could be someone." They stood there in the middle of the ruins. 3 people who'd lost things, Finding something back, Matteo pulled out a pen and scratched 3 words onto a soot-stained counter. Open soon. Family owned. 2 weeks later, the boy stood in a judge's chamber beside Matteo, a social worker, and a lawyer from the Venn family. Across from them, a wealthy-looking couple sat stiffly, the same ones who'd once tried to sweep everything under designer rugs. "He's not your responsibility," the woman snapped. "He's Venn blood. We can give him a future." The boy looked up at Matteo. "I already have one." The judge raised a brow. "Do you understand what you're saying, son?" The boy nodded. "Yes, sir. He's my family. Not because he's rich, but because he stayed." The room fell silent. Outside, media had gathered again, cameras flashing. But inside, something sacred passed between boy and man. After the ruling, temporary custody granted to Matteo pending final adoption, they returned to the charred restaurant, where workers were beginning to clean up the soot. That night, under dim lights and fresh wood panels, the boy handed Matteo a box. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a professional-grade chef's knife. Polished steel, balanced perfectly, engraved on the handle. "Dad." Matteo's hand shook as he pulled it free. "I saved up," the boy said shyly. "Did some deliveries. Asked your daughter for help." Matteo blinked fast, eyes stinging. "This is the sharpest thing I've ever held," he whispered. "You're the reason I'm not broken anymore," the boy replied. Matteo placed the knife gently on the counter and pulled the boy into a tight hug, the kind that said everything he didn't have words for. In that moment, the restaurant didn't matter. The fire, the name, the money, none of it mattered. Only one truth remained. He was no longer cooking alone. The sign above the door read, "The Sunday Spoon, Family Owned." Under it, Matteo tightened his apron one last time, standing beside the boy, now in a white chef's coat 2 sizes too big. His daughter adjusted the fresh chalkboard menu out front, grinning. "Doors open in 5, she said, holding up her phone. "Already got a line." The boy peeked through the blinds. "People really came back?" Matteo chuckled. "People always come back to what feels like home." The lights glowed warm inside. New tables, refinished wood, old burn marks still visible in one corner, left intentionally. "They're part of the story," Matteo had said. "You don't hide the scars. You cook with them." Customers poured in, old friends, neighbors, even a few reporters pretending to be subtle. Every seat filled. Matteo's daughter carried plates with practiced ease. The boy garnished dishes with precision. Laughter bubbled in the air. Jazz from the old radio drifted softly. Steam rose. Knives chopped. Pans sizzled. In the corner booth sat an elderly man, quiet and sharp-eyed, who left no tip but scribbled a note on the receipt. "Sometimes love is the secret ingredient. 5 stars. Anonymous food." Critic Matteo read it, smiled quietly, and slipped it into his coat. Back in the kitchen, the boy slid the Sunday surprise across the pass window. Perfectly plated. Orange zest dancing on the steam. "That's our 5th one tonight," he beamed. "You're getting faster," Matteo said. "Better than me soon." The boy looked up. "Already am." They both laughed, not just with joy but with survival. Outside, the sign flickered slightly. The O in spoon blinked. Matteo didn't fix it. Imperfect places make the best meals. The boy's voice came in soft, steady narration. Not to the crowd, but to us. Years later, he wasn't just a chef. He was the first man who looked at me and didn't see a problem to solve. He saw hunger and offered dignity. Photos flashed across time. Matteo flipping pancakes for laughing kids during a Saturday breakfast service. The boy, older now, taller, showing a new apprentice how to chop parsley with rhythm. The daughter laughing behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, wiping tables as sunlight poured in. He didn't teach me just to cook. He taught me to care, to taste before judging, to forgive like you season, a little at a time. The camera panned across the restaurant wall, where one framed object remained untouched. A faded drawing of a dish, a stolen signature, and next to it, a knife with a single word etched in silver. Dad. The final shot moved slowly across the kitchen. Matteo was older now, gray at the temples, but still humming as he stirred a pot. The boy, now a young man, plated the final course of the night. They bumped shoulders at the pass, no words, just a smile. Then, as the lights dimmed and chairs flipped onto tables, the camera slowly zoomed in on a small frame above the register. An old, stained recipe card, creased at the corners, burned along the edge. It read, in crooked handwriting, "For the boy who changed everything." And beneath that, one final line. The recipe never changed. Just who it was for.